So I've completed all of the infrastructure I care to add in my basement. And I've also completed all the prep, which included refinishing the frames on the basement windows. And I've actually got to start on putting in the blocking that will go above the walls that are running parallel to the joists. So the next step actually is I want to glue up 1.5 inch thick foam board, you know, the pink stuff. And what I did prior to doing that actually is I knocked down all the high spots on the concrete so that foam board would lay reasonably flat. So in preparation for putting up the foam board, before I actually cover the concrete, my wife and I came downstairs and we snapped chalk lines on the floor 4 inches away from the concrete to just for temporary, to allow me to take a straight 2x4 and place the outer edge of the 2x4 on the line. So in theory I should have a 1/2 inch gap between the 2x4 and the wall. And then taking a 4-foot level, and I can keep this 2x4 plumb, I just ran it all the way around where I'm going to finish the basement, you know, about every foot or two, just to see, you know, how plumb the wall is. And I discovered I had some issues. On the wall directly behind the camera, the center of the wall is actually bulged out enough to where a 1/2 inch gap isn't adequate. And this wall is actually leaning in a little bit, and in some spots more than a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to have to step my wall out on both these walls more than I had anticipated. And then the wall directly behind me is not only leaning in a twisty sort of way, but it's not square by a long shot. So we're going to have to go back now and figure out exactly how we want to adjust. In addition, the opposite wall to this wall is not parallel with this wall. So I'm still kind of thinking through the best way for me to make all this stuff work. And I also learned that the beam that runs down not quite the center, but the beam that I have to deal with is not parallel with this wall as well. And it's not off by as much, but I'm going to have to deal with that. Now, I'm not putting a wall directly under the beam. I'm actually pulling the wall away a little bit to, allow myself access to that wall for pulling wires and so on. And also it gave me a chase for the gas line that I had pre-existing and for my compressed air line and the conduit that I added. To measure square, we have these temporary blue chalk lines snapped on the floor, 4 inches away from the concrete walls on either end. I measured out 20 feet along this wall and 15 feet along the wall directly behind me, which is my east wall. We measured a diagonal, and it was considerably shorter than the 25 feet that I expected. I also purchased an inexpensive laser level. So for what it's worth, this is a Hupar 603 CG 3-beam 360-degree laser. Here's what I discovered. So as you can see here, on my long wall, I have the laser laid right down the chalk line. Now if I just spin the camera around, if I trust that my laser is actually square, I have the other beam facing along this wall here. And as you can plainly see, it diverges quite a bit. So of course it's diverging closer to my wall. And this particular wall is actually bowed out at the top. So I'm going to have to pull the framing for this entire wall out quite a bit in order to make this wall square. As a point of reference, I just put a white colored box where the laser can kind of show up, and you can see the original chalk line. I'm probably off by an inch and a half at the far end of this wall, which is a little over 15 feet. So this wall is really out of square. If you found this video useful at all, please give me a like below and comment either way. Consider subscribing to my channel to follow along with me as I complete my basement. Once I was able to establish square for the east and west walls relative to the north wall, and a line for the south and center walls parallel to the north wall, I determined how far out, or actually into the room, to offset a line to clear a 2x4 held plumb. Then I snapped new temporary blue chalk lines. Then I measured out from the wall, again into the room really, an additional 1.5 inches to accommodate the foam board. We snapped red chalk lines because red chalk is a bit more permanent. This is the line that will determine the edge of the treated lumber that I will attach to the floor to support my floating walls. I did all of this prior to installing the foam board while I still had access to the concrete walls. Using my laser level, I also transferred the location of the red chalk lines to the ceiling to aid in attaching the top plates of my walls.